Awesome. We'll answer that question right away. When was I born? There, 1988, I was born. Here's a little history lesson, courtesy of Stash.com, which I shamelessly stole this timeline from. 1940, first video game. 1967, video games meet television. 1972, Magnavox Odyssey launches, but more importantly, Pong came out. That would be an Atari IP. That also got video games into people's homes for the first time. Granted, this is an American timeline, so you might not have the same experience, but I assure you this was my experience before I was born. 1977, Atari's video computer system was released. 1983, basically the crash of the video game industry. 1985, the NES came out. Basically, before I was born, the video game industry was created and destroyed and resurrected, all before 1988. So I grew up on Nintendo. Atari kicked it off. There's important history there. And, you know, the question to ask ourselves is, did Nintendo crawl and walk so that, did Atari crawl or walk so that Nintendo could run? I think it's important to remember where we came from and not forget the classics, which may or may not stand the test of time when played now. Anybody ever try to play an Atari game from like the 1970s or 1980s? No? Does anybody know any Atari games from the 1970s or 1980s? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great, cool. So, basically, the whole idea is how do we bring those into the modern era and bring them to the prominence that they deserve in history? So, part one, Army of One, where we started. This is a real tweet that I sent to Adam Nickerson, who I heard about on a Kind of Funny podcast, where Jared Petty was playing a game called Ding Dong XL on phones. It was a one-button arcade game. And basically, here's the text. Hi, Adam. I'm a producer at Atari. Seriously. And a fan of your work. Was made aware of you when Jared Petty was hyping Ding Dong XL on Kind of Funny Gamescast. Bought it shortly thereafter, and when it was ported to Switch, would love to introduce myself and learn about what you're currently working on, maybe even find some opportunities to collaborate. Who was Adam? Well, made a bunch of these simple, easy, pick-up-and-play arcade games on mobile, basically. Seemed a lot like these classic Atari games that were very simple, pick-up-and-play arcade games. So I reached out to Adam, he wrote back, and we got to work. Had this idea, which was originally called Atari Minis. We didn't actually call them Atari Minis because the CEO, Fred Schnee at the time, said, no one's going to buy a game called Atari Minis. So we tabled the name of it, but we kept on rolling with the pitch. Goals were simple. Revitalize the classic IPs. Titles are meant to not to reinvent, but to basically make each game feel as people would remember playing them. So if you play it, you're not like, so when we started, it was just like, oh, this is the game, not, oh, this feels like an entirely different thing, departure, meant to pay homage to. And then a minimal barrier to entry. Wanted to make sure that Adam's philosophy to games, one button press, very simple, easy to pick up and play, just jump right in, jump out. The tagline on his company at the time was live, die, retry. So unfortunately at the time, not unfortunately, just the realities of it, we were mainly doing mobile games. And we had to find a way to make this work within the confines of the company and what we were going after. It's mostly free to play, a lot of simulated stuff like Roller Coaster Tycoon Touch. And we're like, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we get this through? So we proposed basically a premium game in a freemium package, free to play, get a certain number of lives, play them, you die, you lose them all, you could watch an ad, you get them back. If you want to pay a set price, which we thought the value of the game would be, between $3 and $5 at the time, then you could just own the game, no ads, play as much as you want. We also had a whole roadmap here. So we started with Missile Command, and that was opportunity knocking, because originally with this plan, we're like, hey, we're probably not going to get to do any of these A-tier, high-quality games, but we had an opportunity because it was Missile Command's 40th anniversary, and in order to celebrate that, the company was doing nothing. So there was a big window of opportunity there, and we decided, all right, let's jump on Missile Command. So we were able to get that through. And then what followed was all the B-sides that we were originally going to do when we thought that's all we get away with. Oddly enough, we launched Gravatar 2 years later. Spoiler alert for when I get to that point. But yeah, we talked about Quantum, Dodgem. We didn't do those. So we basically got to work. Adam was the only developer, sort of, more on that later. And we came out, great reception, lots of featuring on the app stores, iOS, Android, positive reception, lots of downloads. It was awesome. However, it came out, hang on. Oh yeah, right. Also one thing to note before I move on, we also had plans at this point to port, because of the successful release, we're feeling great about the game even before it came out. We're like, we're going to port these to Switch. We're going to port to PC, and we're also going to do these, and we're also going to greenlight the next title. So, however, the game came out on March 20th, 2020. That would be about a week after we went into lockdown for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, what we would learn after this point is that the pandemic was actually quite positive for gaming in general, but the initial part was a lot of uncertainty. So we continued with our plans to port it to Steam and Switch, but we then stopped. Didn't do anything, as we just kind of coasted on what we had. Not coasted, that's not really a fair way to put it, but you know what I mean. And we waited. Part 2, Changing Tides. So, it's about July 4th weekend of 2020. I don't know why I remember that date, but I do. I remember that date without even knowing that I wrote this right here in my notes. So I did a complete post-mortem on what happened and what we should do, what we could do, and basically what went right, what went wrong. The ultimate thing that we decided, especially when looking at the premium version compared to the version on mobile that was free to download, is that we needed to go bigger into premium. We need to bet bigger on that. We need to give it, and then we need to create an experience that would cater to that audience. And that's what we planned to do. However, knowing what we wanted to do, it was going to be a larger task than just one guy could do. Let's take a little tangent here. 2019, May. I was playing in a hockey tournament in Las Vegas, staying at the Hooters Hotel. Now, that's the only reason why this is here. And I was in the midst of transitioning another mobile title to another studio, and I was looking for teams. And that's when I first made contact, not in person, they were not there. They were in Lithuania, but that would be Sneakybox. So we reached out, we started talking, and basically, we've been working with them in the past, because not only did they continue, we chose them to work on this project in question that changed hands, but later that year when we were working on, or early the next year, when we were working on Missile Command, they did the augmented reality portion of that title. So there was an established relationship with Adam, and we thought, well, and I knew they had the chops to deliver, so they were part of the plan. In September of 2020, I got back to the timeline after that tangent. In September of 2020, got a call from my boss who basically said, all right, we're ready to get back in. So this is about, what, 3 months, 2 months, 4 months, something like that, after the original postmortem. And I said, well, and he said, all right, we're ready to move forward. We want to do more. Wade Rosen, who is the current CEO and chairman of the board at the time, decided he wants to do more of those things. And he said, I want to do 3 titles. Well, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, all right, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, look at my postmortem, develop how we're going to do this. I got the team, I got the scope, and I basically said, I want to make 3 titles. We went back, he said, make 4 titles. So that's what we did. 4 titles, and yeah, that's how they went. And he also wanted to add co-op, which was not originally part of my plan, but he said they got to have co-op. Where am I? Next series planning. Wait a minute, did I go too far? Nope, good. So, now we're back to the why again, which I didn't say before, but anyway, it's fine. Yeah, we had to update knowing what the new direction was. We had to redefine what the recharge titles were going to be. And we basically reinforced that we want a modern look, aiming for modern nostalgia, reminiscent of those classic IP. Again, don't want to reinvent, stay true to that gameplay, so when they play it, they can say, oh, this is Centipede, this is Asteroids, this is whatever. And the modes that we needed to do were arcade campaign, so that was the build-on of the previous game with Adam, catering to that audience beyond mobile and arcade, give more meat on the bones, and leaderboards, of course, and local co-op. So that's what we did. The result is basically we made 4 games. We made Centipede, Black Widow, Asteroids, and Breakout. And yeah. And of course, the team was great, delivered, upped the value, and we also had original soundtracks for all the game by Megan McDuffie. Also, I didn't mention it before, but all the art was done by Lithuanian artist Maria. Never tried to pronounce that name. Here we go. How do you pronounce it, Tadas? Velikite. There we go. Cool. So, the music. All right. So, yeah, this is what we ended up delivering. We went from doing 1 game with 1 guy to delivering 4 games in the span of 5 months on Steam, Epic Game Store, by the way, also on Linux and Mac OS for those, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series X, and Atari VCS. This is what we ended up delivering and basically followed through on that postmortem with that team, and the results were pretty positive. People liked it. And now I see why I'm wrong with my notes, because I've scrolled too far ahead. So that's what we ended up doing. And it was good, so we thought. Well, it was good. Quickly transitioned, and we know that we wanted to do more after the positive reception, both internally, externally. We had something here, but we needed to reflect. We needed to go back and see what we've done. So another slide here that we basically took the reception from the last ones, fine, but we also needed to reorganize development optimization, which I'm sure Tadas will get into in the following speech, so stick around for that. We had to improve the production process so we could streamline things, because they're not going to say that the first 4 were held together with bubblegum and duct tape, but we did what we could to get them out, and it's the final result that counts anyway. And then, yeah, we wanted to build upon the success and not expose ourselves to fatigue. Because when you release 4 games in a series in a span of 5 months, then at the end of it, people would be like, okay, another one of these, another one of these. Then we started to do Gravatar, Recharged. And this game was the most ambitious title and redefined what Recharge games could be. It was an awesome result. We also got great reviews for it, positive reception. Fans always love it, so it tends to hit the nostalgic buttons that we want to hit, and hitting all those points of the series. But yeah, it was definitely went a bit further than any of the other scopes we've done before, and was a challenge. But we drastically changed the art of the game. It got away from that vector style, kept this more painterly look. But at the end of the day, it still ended up being Gravatar, which was an insanely ambitious game in itself. And fun fact about Gravatar, that was actually a modification. Black Widow, which was the first batch of titles, was a modification of the original Gravatar in arcades. So there's a little bit of a connection there. So risks paid off, positive. And we're still going. We just announced Yars about 2 weeks ago, Yars Recharged. That's based on Yars Revenge, and Yars Revenge, Yars Returns, those classic IPs as well. And we plan to do more as well in the future. So that's the end for now. Just want to re-emphasize the why here, because I just kind of quickly run through the story over the course of 20 minutes and what's going on. There was a point about, I don't know, maybe it was like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. My mom, who's an elementary school teacher, she brings me in for career day to talk to a bunch of first-year-olds about what I do and talk to them about making video games. I'm a producer, so not really, actually making them by hand, but they're first-year-olds. They're first graders, so they don't know. You're talking like 7-year-olds here. And I showed them Pong. And I remember one kid asking the question, why does this game exist? And my answer was, hey, you like Fortnite? And they're like, yeah, we love Fortnite. I'm like Five Guys at Freddy's. Like, yeah, we love Five Guys at Freddy's. I'm like, if you didn't have Pong, you wouldn't have any of that stuff. That was the foundation. You got to remember where you came from. You have to remember the history. And if you think about, there's only so far, emulation can only take you so far. We're getting better with hardware emulation, but if you try to play these games on a computer, it's never quite exactly the experience you want. And the Recharge series is a means to actually give people that experience, at least kind of feel the way that the games were supposed to be back in the day, even if it's not exactly one-to-one, to look at them through a modern lens. And that's why we do what we do, to keep them relevant. It's a means to play the games through a modern lens, which I might have just said. We want to celebrate the past, enjoy the classics, hopefully for another 40 to 50 years to come. And that's it.
Jason, yeah, wonderful presentation. So really inspiring how to see how all these old games can be revived or a bit rethinked, but still staying the same in the modern times. So my question is, when you're going to recharge ET game?
No comment.
Good point. So Q&A session. Who would like to answer? Would like to ask the first question?
Wow.
He's ready to answer anything, I believe.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be about what I talked about.
So I will probably ask the first question. So,
okay.
On your opinion, those games Recharge series was quite successful. What's the key ingredient? Like, is it nostalgia, or because the gameplay itself was so brilliant and well polished? What's the main?
I don't think you could bank on nostalgia. Nostalgia is never a good one to bank on. You can't, if you rely on nostalgia, I think you're bound to fail. You have to take, while you are reviving the classics and respecting where it came from, you need to accept the modern takes on what those games have become and kind of infuse those and make some sort of melding, right? So when Black Widow, when we launched that, that's the best example, right? Because twin stick shooters are so prominent. So we needed to make sure that if you're gonna play Black Widow, you're not gonna be done with it in a span of 5 minutes and say, well, I'll just play Geometry Wars, you know? Or I'll play Bit Blaster or something, not Bit Blaster, what was it? Super Stardust, right? Like, that's an important part, because if you don't stand or at least try to meet the current expectations of the marketplace, then you're doomed to fail. So nostalgia should be there. It should be that appeal. It's almost like an on-ramp for those original fans to go in there, and then for everybody else to say, oh, wow, this is where it all started? Okay, cool, interesting. Yeah, got it, cool. Because think about any time you play a game from back in the day, right? Or maybe you download an emulator, or you get one of like the NES Classics or something like that, right? You start playing, how long do you actually keep playing that game for? Like what, 5 minutes? Like, this is the thing I got. Now I'm gonna go back to playing something new. So that's why I think that nostalgia is always a part of it. That's the kickoff point. And then it's looking at everything else that inspired it, that's taken inspiration from it behind us, and then incorporating it.
Makes sense. Still needs to be a good game, actually, to
absolutely
spend your time on it.
That's part one, all the time. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you,
always
thank
the
you.
goal.
Makes sense. Next question, please. So I will ask also one more question. So
you want to sit? We'll just have a conversation.
Well, I'm fine. So
okay.
Maybe you could cover your future plans, what you preparing for the next releases, if you're able to do that.
Well, Yars is the next one. I don't know if I could go back. No, it's gone. Yars is the next one, and there you go. So this one's based on Yars Revenge. That was actually the highest selling Atari published game. So it didn't outsell something like Pac-Man, but as far as Atari's IPs on the consoles, it was the most successful for Atari. So this one really modernizes it, leaning into more of like a twin stick style game, but also the original Yars. A funny story about Yars, since no one's asking questions. I could kind of tell you this little anecdote. Yars is a game that not many people know how to play. A lot of people bought it. Not many people know how to play it. It's very weird, it's very obscure. It's good once you understand how it works, but it's also very obscure. It's a weird game in that you can shoot, but you can also get up close to the center bad guy and nibble away by just running into these blocks to chip it away. And when we first showed off the game in its early form, we do these things internally, which I call the gauntlets, where everybody's giving their feedback on the game and saying, you know, giving unabashed commentary on it, good, bad, whatever. and somebody in the room didn't realize that you were, and there was a big conversation about how it's a lot of shooting, you know? And at that point, nibbling wasn't in the game. We had it eventually. But one of the guys said, hey, why can't you nibble? That you gotta be able to nibble, otherwise it's not yours. And another guy in the room said, I didn't know you could nibble, I just thought you could shoot. So you had two people who were playing the game entirely differently and did not know how to do it. We incorporated both of them in the game, but this is, our goal with this one is to be like one of the most accessible versions of Yar's Revenge. And that's what we got.
Good story, so kind of fixing the existing stuff and making it in...
Not even fixing, it's more like, I don't want to say, things progress forward, right? Like I'm firmly in believe that. And I also am biased because, as I said before, this stuff came out before I was born. So I don't have that nostalgia to say what it was like to pick up and play those games back in the 70s or 80s when I couldn't compare them to a Super Mario Brothers, right? Because that changes everything.
Yeah.
And then modern gaming is always going to move forward and improve upon things. There's arguing about certain things, but for the most part, mechanically, signposting, like how do you play a game, feel of the game, all those things get better over the course of time, and they just didn't know back in the day. They were doing the best with what they got.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, you can make something more accessible. You can learn. You can't ask Howard Scott Warshaw back in, 1982 to say, hey man, or I think it was 82, yeah, to say, hey, I don't know how to play this game. It's like, that's how we knew how to make a game. That's how we knew how to make games. That's how you know how to present them in the marketplace. So
yeah, definitely.
You work
because
with what you got.
It's funny actually how the limitation of technologies or any sort of limitation actually kind of makes you to be creative and invent something really simple.
Absolutely.
But something really, really working.
Oh yeah, the story behind Yars, it's out there. You should look it up. They got quotiles. They got Yars, who are houseflies born from people or something. They're like half flies, half people because of space. It's crazy. It's bananas. You shoot a Zorlon cannon. There's a lot of stuff going on in that game.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.